یکی بود، یکی نبود. غیر از خدا هیچکی نبود. Long ago, when there was no one but God, there was a thorn seller, a Khorassan, and every day he would climb the steep slopes of his village to collect the branches of the brushwood tree, which he would sell to the bakers for their ovens, where they would bake their naan, their bread. On one such day, when the midday sun was beating on his back, and the sweat was streaming from his brow as he climbed those steep slopes, he looked up to that sky, that blue sky empty of clouds with the burning sun in the middle of it, and he cried out, "Se abasi, 3 silver coins only if I had 3 silver coins. For if I did, one I would keep, the other I would offer to a person in need, and with the third I would make Ajil Moshkal Gosha while listening to the troubles of another. 3 silver coins, only if I had 3 silver coins." Now at that moment, he heard footsteps approach him from behind. And when he turned around, he saw a stranger with large green eyes, a long thin nose, and a small little pink mouth. And the stranger spoke to him in this way. "ببخشید، لطفاً به من کمک کنید." Excuse me, can you help me?" Help him, thought the thorn seller to himself. Who has ever helped me in my long, hard life? But then the thorn seller thought again, and he turned to the stranger and he said, "Bale, yes, how can I help you?" "Bia," he replied. Come, follow me." So the thorn seller followed the stranger as he led him up one mountain and down another, up another mountain and down another, up and down for most of that day, until the poor thorn seller's feet were sore from all the walking and climbing. And he turned to the stranger and he said, "Where are you leading me? Where are you leading me after all?" The stranger only returned to him and said this, "Bia, come, follow me." So the thorn seller followed the stranger for most of that day. They climbed up one more mountain, and atop that mountain below, the thorn seller saw spread below him a desert. But in the middle of that desert, there was a flock of sheep who were grazing on grass. But there wasn't a single blade of grass that grew in that desert. As they descended from the mountain and approached that flock, then and only then the thorn seller turned to the stranger and said, "I don't understand. What are these sheep grazing on? Not a single blade of grass grows in this desert." But this is how the stranger replied. "You can't see the grass that grows in this desert. For the grass that these sheep graze on is none other than the grass that grows in Iranavish, the grass that grows in the secret kingdom." Look over my sheep, and if you do so, I will come at the end of this day and reward you handsomely for it. So the stranger left the thorn seller to look over this flock of sheep who were grazing on their invisible grass. And then the sun descended, stretching the shadows into the horizon. And at that hour, once again the thorn seller heard those same footsteps approaching him from behind. And when he turned around, there was the stranger with his large green eyes. And in his hand he was holding a jute bag that hung heavily from it. And the thorn seller's heart began to race, thinking that this must be his reward. And so he snatched the bag from the hands of the stranger and turned his back to him and opened quickly to see what was in that jute bag, only to find that inside there were only rocks. And enraged, the thorn seller turned to the stranger, shaking his fist, saying, "How dare you? After working for you, is this the reward you give me?" But when he turned around, the stranger was no more. Instead, he saw only a white cat with large green eyes. And the cat turned around, waving its long white tail. And the cat then disappeared into the approaching darkness of the night. And the poor thorn seller took that jute bag filled with rocks, threw it over his back, and made his way back home, up one mountain and down another, and again and again. By the time he had walked through the door of his own house, it was already night. And at the door, his wife and his daughter were waiting for him. "Pedar, father," they cried out, "have you brought us anything for us to eat tonight?" "Leave me alone," said the thorn seller. "I am so tired." And he went to the hearth, to the fireplace, to dump those rocks, and was just about to take his first footsteps towards his bed. But at that moment there was a knock at his door. And when he went to his door and opened it, there was his neighbor. "Bebashid, lotfan beman komak konid. Excuse me, neighbor. Can you help me?" "Help you?" cried the thorn seller. "How can I help you? I don't have any energy left. I have nothing to give you." "Bebashid," said the neighbor. "Oh, leave me alone," said the thorn seller, and he slammed the door in his neighbor's face. But as he walked towards that fireplace, he saw the rocks that he had dumped there were glowing so brightly. And then he understood that his neighbor had come to his house, seeing the light coming from his house, and was asking for some fire. And so the thorn seller turned to his wife and he said, "Throw a blanket over those shining stones. Otherwise, our neighbors won't give us a moment peace tonight. They'll be knocking on our door every hour of the night." And so that was what she did. She threw a blanket over those shining stones. But the next morning, when that blanket was removed, the thorn seller and his wife saw at their feet countless jewels, diamonds, rubies, emeralds, more riches than they had ever seen in their whole life. And then the thorn seller turned to his wife and he said, "Let's be smart about this. Let us hide these jewels and spend them very judiciously, spending one jewel at a time so our neighbors will not notice our newly found wealth." And so that is what they did. And with each day, the neighbors noticed that the house of the thorn seller got a little bigger. their gardens got greener, richer, with more rare flowers. And before they knew it, their neighbors remarked that the thorn seller and his wife were living in a palace worthy of the Pacha, the king himself. And around their palace they had planted the most enchanted garden. And so word spread across the kingdom about the thorn seller and his newly found wealth. And this word spread from town to town to town until it reached the ear of the Pacha, of the king himself. "What is this?" said the king. "Is there a subject in my kingdom who dares to have a palace as splendid as my own? I must see this for myself with my own eyes." And so the king made his way to that remote village where the thorn seller lived. And then he approached the magnificent gardens and the palace where the thorn seller lived. As he was walking down the main walkway, there was the thorn seller, in splendid silken clothes, with open arms welcoming the Pacha as a long-lost friend. And so when the Pacha and thorn seller discovered that they were both very rich, they realized they had so much in common. The Pacha had a daughter, and the thorn seller had a daughter, and the two daughters soon became fast friends. Every day they went together to the stream, where they bathed among the birds that flew around them. How much fun they had! And this went on for days and weeks as the weather allowed it. And then one day, as they both finished bathing, the Pacha's daughter went to the bank where she left her clothes and her jewels. And as she was dressing herself, she discovered that there was a necklace adorned by a precious ruby that her father gave her a while ago that was her most prized possession. She discovered that ruby necklace was no longer there. And so she turned to the thorn seller's daughter, and she cried out, All right, give it back to me." But the thorn seller's daughter looked back. "Dustam, my friend, I don't understand what you're saying." "I know that you took that ruby necklace from me. It was a gift from my father. Now give it back to me." "But I took nothing," protested the Khorassan's daughter. "I took nothing," protested the thorn seller's daughter. "You're lying to me," said the Pacha's daughter, said the king's daughter. "You are lying to me, and I'm going to tell my father, and he's going to throw you and your family all in jail." And so she went back home to her father. And when her father heard this story, the Pacha, the king, became enraged. "I befriended that thorn seller. I made him as one of my closest friends. And this is how he repays my friendship." And his heart filled with rage, the king made the accusation against the thorn seller and his family. And soon they were all thrown in jail. And to make the sentence even crueler, each of them was put in a separate jail. And so the thorn seller found himself all alone in a prison cell, with but one window looking out on a busy street, one window with iron bars so he could not escape. And every day in the loneliness of his cell, he could look out that window and see all the people passing by, and not one of them noticing him. Day after day, how long it was, so long that there came a moment when he lost all hope. But then at that moment, there were two doves that flew through the window. flew right through the window and made their way to the floor of the prison cell. And they made these very strange sounds. Brr, brr, selbasi, selbasi. Brr, brr, selbasi, selbasi. And with their talons they started digging at the floor of the cell. Brr, brr, selbasi, selbasi. Brr, brr, selbasi, selbasi. At first the thorn seller did not understand. But as a whole their digging became deeper. The thorn seller saw that right beneath that floor there was something that was glowing, that was glistering. And when he went down to see what it was, he discovered 1 silver coin, 2 silver coins, and then a third silver coin. And at that moment he remembered. He remembered what he had promised if he had 3 silver coins. But it wasn't too late, he thought. So he tried. He made his way to the window and he tried to stick out his head among the bars in that window, crying out to all the passerbys. He cried out to each of them, "Bebachid, lotfan beman komak konid. Excuse me, can you help me? Bebachid, lotfan, excuse me, can you help me? Bebachid, lotfan, excuse me, can you help me?" He cried out again and again, and not one of them noticed him. He cried and cried in despair, feeling so unnoticed, feeling so unloved, but he still cried, "Bebachid lotfan beman komak konid. Excuse me, please, can you help me?" And when he cried one more time, as he thought he was giving his last breath, then and only then he heard a voice from the other side of the prison wall. "Bale, yes, how can I help you?" And he tried to look through the window to see who was speaking with him. And there on the other side was an old woman. Her face was framed in a black chadur, and her large dark eyes were looking at him with such kindness. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" "Khanum, dear lady," said the thorn seller, "take this silver coin in my hand and go to the market and buy dry chickpeas and raisins and bring them here so we can share a plate of Ajil Moshkal Gosha together." So the old woman went with that silver coin, and when she returned, together they shared Ajil Moshkal Gosha. And as they were talking, the thorn seller asked the woman this question, "Khanum, dear lady, so many people have passed me by when I cried out to them. Not one of them noticed me, except you. Why did you, of all those people, stop and listen to me? Why?" "Only God knows such mysteries," said the kind old woman. "Perhaps all those others did not have sadness come visit them at their door. I, after all, am not such a person. For you see, the last year I lost my husband, and at that moment I felt such a terrible loneliness, a loneliness that before I only pitied in others. But I thank God that at least God had left me with my son. But now you see my son is ill. And I don't have enough money to buy the medicine that the doctor says he needs. But the doctor says if he doesn't get his medicine soon, he will not live another day. And I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do if I will lose my son. I don't know what to do." The old woman began to weep. And at that moment, the thorn seller gave to the old woman the second silver coin. Khanum, he said to her, take this silver coin and go home. And when you do, I promise you, your son will be well again. No, no, said the woman as she wiped her tears. I cannot accept anything, for I have given you nothing. No, no, I cannot take this coin. Khanum, dear lady, replied the thorn seller, you are wrong, for today you have given me a very precious thing. For today you have taught me how to listen. Go home now, and I promise when you return, your son will be well again. And so the old woman took that silver coin, and when she walked through the door of her home, she made her way to the bed where she left her son that morning. But there was no one lying in that bed, and a heaviness came over her heart. He died while I was gone. They took him away. Now I'm all alone. Now I am all alone. And she felt all the heaviness of the sadness about her as she was about to go into a swoon. And she was about to fall. But soon as she fell, a pair of arms caught her. And when she turned around, there was her son, standing tall and healthy. And she embraced her son, tears running down her cheeks. Mahmud, Mahmud, my son, she said again and again. And as she wiped her tears, she showed her son that silver coin. And her son took that silver coin and said this to his mother. Madaram, my mother, let us take that silver coin and turn it into 3. 1 to keep, 1 to offer a person in need, and with the third to mate Ajil Moshkal Gosha while listening to the troubles of another. Now in the meanwhile, there was the thorn seller in his prison, with but a few crumbs left of that Ajil Moshkal Gosha, which he shared with the kind old woman. And he tossed those crumbs right through the window into the street. And at that moment, a flock of white doves descended upon the crumbs like a cloud that was descending to the earth. Brr, brr, Saubasi, as they all cried out, as they ate what remained of the crumbs. Brr, brr, Saubasi, Saubasi. And then the doves ascended like a single white cloud, and they all flew together towards that stream where once the Pacha, the king's daughter, and the thorn seller's daughter bathed. But on that day, at the stream, only the king's daughter was bathing. Brr, brr, Saubasi, Saubasi, said the doves as they surrounded the princess. Brr, brr, Saubasi, Saubasi. At first she didn't understand. And then the doves with their white wings were splashing water in her face. Brr, brr, Saubasi, Saubasi. She became frightened as the doves began to push her towards a bank. And as she went towards the bank, there she saw a bush. And hanging from that bush was that ruby necklace. That ruby necklace that she had lost that day when she bathed with the Khorassan's daughter. That's where I left it, she cried to herself. And so she put the ruby necklace around her neck. But at that moment she remembered. She remembered the terrible things she did to the thorn seller's daughter and all her family. And so once she dressed, she ran to her father, the moisture streaming from her hair, tears running down her cheek, and she ran to her father, the king, and she said, Pedaram, dear father, I have done a terrible thing. You must release the thorn seller and his family at once, for they were innocent after all. And when the king saw that ruby necklace around his daughter's neck, he understood the terrible thing they had done. And so at once he released the thorn seller and all his family. And he restored all the wealth they had before. And on top of that, the king gave him even twice the wealth he had had before. So the thorn seller from that time on was indeed a very wealthy man. But the wealth did not console him, for there was always this bitterness in his heart. What is this thing life, he said to himself. One day you're the wealthiest man in the world and everyone is your friend. And then the next day, all your riches are taken from you and no one knows your name. What is this thing life? What is this thing life? He kept saying to himself as his heart became more bitter and bitter at the thought of it. But when he thought this way, he remembered that kind old woman, and he remembered those 3 silver coins he gave to that woman. He remembered that silver coin he gave to that woman. And then he thought of that coin going from hand to hand to hand. And as he thought more on this, a smile came to his face, and he said this to himself. You know, I will never lose hope in this world. I will never lose hope in this world. As long as everyone who receives that silver coin turns it into 3. 1 to keep, 1 to offer a person in need, and with the third to make Ajil Moshkal Gosha while listening to the troubles of another. Bala raftim mastbud, Bain amadim dochbud, Yeseye ma dorochbud. Like yogurt is from milk, and old was once new. Many lies I have told you, which in the telling come true.